Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing a wrap-up of my May monthly priority, which was the Asian Readathon, which was hosted by Cindy at withcindy. I will link her channel and all of the information about that below. So if you aren't familiar with my monthly priorities, I will also link a video and playlist of that below. But basically what I'm going to do today for wrapping up is talk about the books that I read, as well as what prompts they satisfied for the Asian Readathon, talk about some themes that I noticed across these different reads, and then also give you some recommendations for books that I think you really should pick up. So first, let me tell you about the books that I finished in May by Asian authors. It ended up being quite a lot. I was in a really big reading kick in May. So I ended up reading 13 books, 5 of which were actually on my TBR. So let me start with the books that were on my TBR, beginning with Goodbye Vitamin by Rachel Khong. This is a book that I was super looking forward to. Rachel Khong is a Malaysian American author, and this is a book that David at ThePoptimist had done a whole video kind of promoting in a Book Talk versus BookTube promotion video. I'll link that below. And I'd been really wanting to read this for a while, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. I absolutely loved this book. I have an entire review for it, so I will link that below. Basically, this is a contemporary story told in a series of basically diary entries where the main character, Ruth, is in her 30s and a little bit lost in life, but she goes back home to help her mom take care of her dad, who is developing dementia. And it's all about her kind of renegotiating that relationship with her parents as an adult and dealing with caring for a sick and aging parent. And there is so much in this that I loved. I loved the writing style. I loved the depth of emotion of this story, even though it's told through such mundane episodes. It is something that on the surface is very calm, but underneath really pulled at my heartstrings. I loved this book so much. Next is The Red Threads of Fortune by Nian Yang, who is a Singaporean non-binary queer author. This is the second book in the Tenserit series, which is a SFF kind of silk punk novella series. And this second book has all of the great world building of the first book, this kind of mixture of technology and sort of Eastern mythology and magic. Really, really cool world building, lots of political intrigue, but it's very much focusing on the main character, Mokoya, dealing with a lot of grief and trauma. And so there's a little bit of angst and drama in this book, but it also has a lot of very important good themes. Next is Lalani of the Distant Sea by Erin Entrada Kelly, who is a Filipino-American author. This is such a neat middle grade secondary world fantasy story that is inspired by Filipino folklore. In it, we follow Lalani, who is growing up in a very poor fishing village where lots of bad stuff is happening, like drought, and also many of the men go missing every year as they attempt to sail across the sea to this kind of mythical magical isle of Isa, where good fortune awaits. And things get so bad at home that she has to try to sail there herself. This has so much really cool mythology and world building in it. It is rather dark, kind of like a Grimm's fairy tale type of story, in that really quite dark things happen, but I loved it so much. I also have a standalone review for this one, so I will link that below. Next is Saigon by Phuc Tran. This is a memoir of Phuc Tran growing up as a Vietnamese refugee to a small town in Pennsylvania in the 1970s, and it's his coming of age story of kind of trying to figure out how he fits in this very small town, what his identity is, really rebelling against the system in a lot of ways, and dealing with some generational trauma. It's beautifully written. It has such great humor in it as well, even though there's quite a lot of heavier themes in it and topics, but it is just very beautifully written and very literary in that he loves classical literature, and so there's constantly references and allusions made to literature. So this was just a really fantastic read. And the last book from my TBR that I read was Ripples by Shi Li Kao, who is a Malaysian author. This is a collection of short stories that are really fantastic. So these short stories explore different people in a town in Malaysia, and it has some interconnectedness of the places and the characters. There's a lot of feminist themes in here, some magic as well in some of the stories. It's a little dark at times. There are quite a few content warnings, so I do have those linked below. But wow, it was such fantastic writing. There's a lot of humor in this as well, and just really such an immersion in this Malaysian town and in these people's lives in such very short stories. This was really great. Now moving on to the books that I read that were not on my TBR, starting with In Real Life by Cory Doctorow, illustrated by Jen Wong. Jen Wong is a Taiwanese-American illustrator and author. This is a graphic novel that is really about a girl joining an online kind of gaming community, finding some kind of self-realizations and actualizations in that game, but also realizing that there's quite a lot of issues in terms of exploitation of Chinese workers who are mining in the game. And so it's a lot of political questions in this, and it's absolutely beautifully illustrated. Next is the Baldwin Village series by Jackie Lau. This is a contemporary romance series. I read all of the trilogy, and I do have a review for the entire trilogy, so I'll link that below. Set in Baldwin Village, which is kind of a foodie part of Toronto. And we follow some different couples coming together, often over food, and really exploring a lot of issues of Chinese Canadian identity. So the first book in this, The Ultimate Pie Day Party, is about a guy who wants to throw a Pie Day, so March 14th party, and so he hires another woman who has a pie catering company to do so, and they end up falling in love. The next is Ice Cream Lover, which is about a guy who has had some bad experiences with ice cream and hates it now, but he ends up falling for a woman who owns an ice cream shop. And then the third story, Man vs. Durian, was my absolute favorite, and it's my favorite cover. And it is about a guy who has had some bad experiences with durian, which is a very smelly fruit, and ends up falling in love with a woman who not only adores durian, but resembles durian in her personality a little bit. And it's just so wonderful. So all three of these are just filled with really interesting explorations of identity and of kind of feminist issues, but they're filled also with people coming together and falling in love. I really love this. If you like contemporary romance, you should pick this series up. Next, I read Quiet Girl in a Noisy World by Debbie Tung, who is Chinese-British, and this is a collection of kind of comic panels in a sense, exploring Debbie Tung's kind of coming to terms with her introversion and her need for quiet. It is beautifully illustrated and has lots of interesting things about kind of introversion and anxiety in it, although it can be a little bit repetitive at times. Next, I read Ginger and Chrysanthemum by Kristen Mai Gyang, illustrated by Shirley Chan, I think both of whom are Chinese American. This is a picture book that is all about two cousins who have very different personalities, but who are trying to come together and create a wonderful birthday celebration for their grandmother. It's a really cute, sweet story about dealing with different personality types and how to work together. Next is Spy X Family Volume 1 by Tatsuya Endo, translated from Japanese by Casey Lowe. This is a manga that really was so hilarious and made me laugh so much. It is set in sort of an alternate world version of the Cold War with East and West Berlin, and it follows a spy who's very good at what he does, but he works alone, except that he needs to get some partners in order to infiltrate an academy, a school. And so he has to get a fake daughter and a fake wife, and what he doesn't know about the people he obtains is that the fake daughter is a telepath and the fake wife is an assassin, and it is just absolutely absurd and ridiculous. There's so much action. It's just such a fun manga. And lastly, I read The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly by Sun-mi Hwang, translated from Korean by Chi-young Kim and illustrated by Nomoko. This is a literary fiction that I heard about from Freddie at Sluggish Reader. I will link him and his review of it below. And this is set in kind of a farm, and all of the characters are farmyard animals. We follow a hen who has been laying lots of eggs, but the farmer keeps taking them, and she's getting really depressed because she wants to raise a baby. That's her big dream in life. And so the story follows her in her attempts to have a baby and really buck the system and not do what she's supposed to do. I loved a lot of those themes of kind of going against the grain and following your own dreams, although this focused a little bit on the intense sacrifices of motherhood, which wasn't quite so much my style. So now I want to briefly talk about the prompts for the Asian Readathon and which books satisfied those. The first two prompts, which were to read a book by an Asian author and the second to read one featuring an Asian protagonist, I believe all of the books that I read satisfied. The third prompt was to read something in your favorite genre, which for me is SFF, so I'm counting The Red Threads of Fortune and Lilani of the Distant Sea. The fourth prompt was to read nonfiction. For this, I read Saigon and Quiet Girl in a Noisy World. And the fifth prompt was to read books that were not US-centric. So I have quite a few that I think satisfy this. First is Ripples, because it's set in Malaysia. Then all three of the Baldwin Village series, since they're set in Canada. Then Quiet Girl in a Noisy World, set in the UK. Spy X Family, which is Japanese. And The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly, which is Korean. And as a note for the Asian Readathon, you are supposed to make sure that for each of the prompts, you satisfy it with an author from a different Asian ethnicity. And although I do have overlaps, I do have at least a unique Asian ethnicity in each of the prompts. Okay, so now I want to talk about some of the themes that I noticed across these different reads, and there were quite a few that really popped out to me. So the first one is just complicated family dynamics. This was in almost all of the books, actually. For example, in Spy X Family, clearly complicated family relationships because you have all of these people who don't really know what each other does and are trying to work together, but have different understandings of their roles. In Goodbye Vitamin, you have the main character who is trying to renegotiate that relationship with her parents as an adult, and she's dealing with kind of coming to terms with what it means to have a father who has dementia. You have The Red Threads of Fortune, where you've got a lot of very complicated family dynamics, where you've got love, but you've also got trauma, you've got hurt, you've got also some very interesting relationships in terms of Mokoya is married, but in an open relationship where she is also having very romantic and sexual relationships with other people at the same time, and that's totally okay. So that's a very interesting dynamic. You've got Ripples, which has a lot of very interesting, very complicated family dynamics between different characters, and I love how in the different stories you see different perspectives, because you'll often see the husband's perspective for one thing and then the child's perspective for another, or the wife's for another, or an aunt or a grandmother, and it's very interesting. Also the Baldwin Village series, all of those really focus especially on family dynamics. A lot of them are about adult children trying to, again, renegotiate their relationship with their parents, which sometimes isn't very healthy, and come to better terms with that as an adult. Another theme that I saw in a lot of these books was bucking the system, really just rejecting the status quo, the patriarchy, capitalism, those sorts of things. So in Lilani of the Distant Sea, Lilani is in a village that is very strictly run by kind of an overseer, and she's bucking a lot of what she is supposed to fall in and do. Also, it's only men that are supposed to sail across to the magical island of Issa, and so by her deciding to do that, she's bucking the system. And there are other characters in the story who are also doing similar things. In Saigon, I really love Phuc Tran is totally into punk, and he's very rebellious as a teenager and very much against the system, while also kind of fighting with his desire to fit in with the system. It's really fascinating. In The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly, the hen is all about rejecting this system of her constantly giving up her eggs and saying, that's not what I want out of my life. And she faces some pretty extreme consequences from refusing to fall in line and refusing to do what is expected of her. And in Real Life, by Cory Doctorow and Jen Wong, that is all about recognizing when a system is set up unfairly and trying to fight against it and some of the complications that arise from that. And the last theme that I noticed that I wanted to talk about is that of self-discovery. So many of these stories were really focused on the characters discovering who they were, figuring out their identity, figuring out who they wanted to be. In all of the Baldwin Village series, I think that this is a theme, but especially in Ice Cream Lover, where the heroine is someone who is third generation Chinese Canadian and feels very, very separated from her heritage, especially because her father is white Canadian and he just doesn't even understand, and her mother has passed away, and so she's lost that connection. She has very few family members that she can connect to, and so one of the things that she's doing is she's opened a Chinese flavors or Asian flavors ice cream shop and trying to reconnect that way. It's so beautiful, this way that she's trying to rediscover herself and her identity. In Saigon, the whole book is about Phuc Tran discovering who he is, discovering especially how to identify himself when he's basically one of the only kids in his little Pennsylvania town who isn't white. What does that mean? How does he fit in? Who does he want to be? Does he want to assimilate, or does he want to reject that? So many great questions. In Quiet Girl in a Noisy World, similarly, Debbie Tung is trying to understand, should she be doing all of these things to fit in socially that she feels very uncomfortable with, like going to parties and hanging out with people, or should she embrace her inner introversion and kind of hermit-like tendencies and just say, no, I just want to hang out at home and read books and not deal with social interactions? So kind of coming to terms with who she is versus what society expects of her. And lastly, Goodbye Vitamin. So Goodbye Vitamin is another one that I think is very subtly about this. So in this, the main character is not just dealing with her parents, but is also dealing with herself. So it's very much about her understanding what her choices have been in life, what she values in life, and who she wants to be. And there's no necessarily, final answers in this book, but the way that it is explored, I think, is just that process of self-discovery that I really love. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is give you guys some recommendations for which of these books I think you should pick up. I have talked about a lot of really wonderful books, but I wanted to narrow it down to just 3, in case you don't have time to read all of these, that I strongly recommend, although it was very hard to narrow this down. So the first is Lilani of the Distant Sea by Erin Entrada Kelly. I think that this is just fantastic in terms of the world building, in terms of the themes, in terms of the atmosphere. I think that a lot of people who like SFF don't necessarily pick up middle grade, but this is such a great example of how amazingly written middle grade fantasy can be. I really loved this one. I'd also like to recommend Goodbye Vitamin by Rachel Kong. This was gorgeously written. It is so subtle in the way that it just uses the mundane everyday experiences and these diary entries to explore some really, really deep themes. It moved me so deeply. I really loved this one. And lastly, I'd like to recommend Ripples. I think that this is a book that so many people would love if only they had heard of it or could pick it up. Because it is published by a small Malaysian press, I think it is not something that most people know about. And it's also a little hard to get your hands on it. You can't get it through Amazon or, generally speaking, your library or anything like that. But you can get an ebook from the publisher itself. So I will link that below, and I think it's only about $5. So I definitely recommend getting your hands on this because it is so great. If you like short stories, if you like sort of contemporary fiction that examines lots of really interesting issues that affect especially women. And also, if you just want to read more internationally written works and broaden your horizons, this is so perfect and really gives you that sense of place and history and culture of Malaysia. So it's really worth picking up. Okay, so that wraps up my May monthly priority. If you guys have read any of these books, if you have any recommendations for me, if you have anything that you're interested in reading, any thoughts, anything at all, just leave me a comment down below.